will take various positions because of particular affiliation to government or opposition. Let's be clear about it. I think the appeal has to go out to individuals regardless of which organizations they are attached to. And there are organizations that will be fully supportive. But what the point that has to be gotten across is that it affects every single one of us. And whether in an organized fashion in any organization as part of the so-called civil society or not, everyone will be consumed if we do not act together.
It's clear that there might have been a directing mind or a collection of directing minds in all of this, but there might have been, and there almost certainly would have been, different fingers on the trigger. The political directorate has dismissively said, well, this is a matter for the police force to investigate. It would seem to me that we have murderers walking the streets of Georgetown, Guyana, Linden. What's your position on this?
But the point is, Chris, it could not be that it is for the police to investigate. The facts are that the police has refused to investigate for the last 6 years these blatant acts of murder. And the evidence is there. I pointed out before that the police cannot claim not to have had any evidence on which to proceed. George Bacchus, for example, produced a sworn affidavit that I'm aware of, accompanied by a tape recording. That tape recording and affidavit was delivered by me personally to the then Commissioner of Police, along with another.
Winston Felix?
Yes, along with another affidavit, which the person who swore it is still confidential because of the fact that George Bacchus's brother and subsequently George Bacchus was murdered, caused us to have to indulge in some protective measures of the second affidavit. But there is a second affidavit which is also in the which names person. Yes, and they're in the possession of the Guyana Police Force, and they've been there for years. Nothing has happened except the elimination of witnesses. And so I want to debunk that theory of this proposal being advanced. It is for the police. The fact is the police has refused to act. On the second issue of involvement of civil society, I would say that we need to recognize that this is not a partisan political issue. That is why the opposition parties feel comfortable in dealing with this issue. This is a matter that affects the entire morality and security of all Guyanese. And it is for us as Guyanese to understand that if we allow the government to get away with the murder of more than 200 people in this country, at a time when we, at the moment, have some bit of evidence that we can bring them to account, it is for all Guyanese, irrespective of political associations, social organization, to recognize that this is the time to guarantee our children a future that is not one that is dependent on the state's orders.
I just want to add quickly on this issue of the police. The police force has a constitutional duty and mandate, and should not await instructions before investigating. Its job is to protect and serve, and therefore part of that is investigate and to prevent crimes, and if crimes have been committed or have been alleged to have been committed, to go after the perpetrators. And yes, you are right, there are people who have indulged in actual murder, walking the streets. There are those who have acted as the co-conspirators, in a sense, by coming up with some of the ideas and the list of names of those who are to be murdered, abducted, and so forth. So I think it's simply hogwash to hear these stupid statements coming from the Office of the President that I've passed this to the police and that to the police. And by way of analogy or comparison, when it was that McCoy went and complained recently that his name was caught up with some taping, the police started looking for the little boy. The victim became the criminal. And here's a case where they said they're looking for the boy, and only began looking for the boy when a complaint was made by McCoy, when it should have been the other way around. And so they are now in a position where they sit and wait for instructions from the political directorate, and that is the unfortunate state of the police force and its top brass. And so we reject this insinuation that the police needs to act and is not acting, because we firmly have the belief that they have been instructed not to act on any of these complaints or allegations which are out there.
Just one quick thing on that one is that it is also the government has the responsibility, because we have the police itself have been implicated in a number of these incidences. Of the 200, a number of people who are ex-policemen, for example. So it's would be a case where the police will have to be investigating possibly people within its own ranks who are serving today, and that to me is the dilemma that the police finds itself in, and therefore this has to be taken into consideration also. Why nothing has been done, perhaps, by the very police force.
No, but when the spy computer was found, I put it that way, was found by the Guyana Defense Force, because the police obviously knew it existed. Because at Good Hope, present with Roger Khan's men, was a serving member of the Guyana Police Force, whom the police later on stated was on special assignment. So it is clear that very early, with the very first public exposure of the government involvement with the spy computer, it was quite evident that certain sections of the police force were in league. And then Roger Khan subsequently placed an ad, which has not been refuted by the government, that for years he has been recruiting and working with the security forces in the management of this phantom gang. No one has denied this. So I think Mr. Franklin's statement is just not just hearsay or guesswork. We have evidence out there, except that to have evidence put in a court of law, we'll have to have people who will come and say, yes, A, B, C, D, and that we've been denied that privilege in Guyana because of the execution of even the witnesses.
But given what Mr. Franklin has said about the involvement of the police force, and you reinforce it with the case of the spy computer and Roger Khan and Good Hope,
sections of the police force,
and
or
sections of the police
individuals.
force, they take collective responsibility. Would you say that that in fact makes the case for an independent inquiry?
That's one of the
That's one of the reasons.
One of the reasons, certainly.
The government, the security forces.
If for nothing else, we need it is because the investigative capacity of our police force has been compromised. Hence the need for an independent group with international experience and that has worked ferreting out instances and disappearances and murders in a case like we have now.
Yeah, I would use the opportunity of that comment to deal with the criticism that the government always makes, or an excuse that they very often offer. And that excuse is that if we're going to investigate things, we have to investigate the opposition as well. Now, the position which we have taken is that the opposition has always been within the reaches of Guyanese law, Guyanese rules, Guyanese regulations. It is the government and its cohorts who are able to operate above and beyond the reaches of the law. So we are always the subject, potentially and legally and practically, subject to any investigation the police wants to carry out. So when we make a case for an international independent inquiry into these matters, we're doing it only because the persons against whom we're laying the charges are able to operate above and beyond the law. So there's no moral equivalence in claiming that if you want to investigate us, we must investigate you, because the capacity to investigate us has always been there. Mm-hmm. And the moral case for the investigation that we're calling for rests on the fact that these people operate above and beyond the reaches of the law. And the public needs to know that. But despite that, I think one of the points which the opposition seems to be willing to make at this stage is that any matters the independent inquiry wants to investigate that involve breaches of the rule of law, they are free to do, and we give our commitment to be supportive of it. So we're not trying to shield ourselves from any fallout from investigations.
You're suggesting, Professor Thomas, that once the government agrees, it's merely a matter of agreeing the terms of reference.
Yeah, basically. But this is not the first time. You will recall that in the post-East Coast violence